Welcome to the Album Anniversary Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb, or Caleb the Spy, on Twitter and Instagram. Today's show is about the Insyderz 1998 album, Skalleluia. I'm joined by two special guests. Joe Yerke from the Insyderz will stop by and talk about the album, and then I'll be joined by fellow ska lover, Todd, to talk about the album and about 1,000 other things. Every day on social media, I do post about album anniversaries, and I try and do a regular weekly show. During that show, I recap the week and talk about them more briefly, and just kind of some of the albums that stuck out to me. But like I said earlier, on this week's show, on this episode, we're going to talk about Skalleluia from the Insyderz. We're going to get to the Joe Yerke section in a second, but first, I'm super excited to be joined by Todd. So Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Caleb. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking some time out. I don't know about you. It's raining here in Minnesota, and we're pretty close geographically.
There has been some thunder. I haven't gone outside yet this morning, but yeah, I think there is. It's supposed to taper off, though, by this afternoon, so I'm hoping to get outside later for a bike ride. But yeah, it's been raining here, too.
Well, nothing like a little bit of... a little bit of Skalleluia to brighten a rainy day. That's my opinion.
There you go. I did listen to it recently, because it's an album I listened to a lot when I was younger, but I hadn't listened to in a while, so I made sure to pull it up on Spotify last week to refresh myself. So
I usually do want to get to talk with people about, what their introduction is to that. So we're going to come back to, Todd just mentioned, he listened to it when he was a kid or younger, and we'll get back to that in just a second. So before we get to kind of Todd's history with the album and why it's important to him, we're going to talk about a little history. We're going to play the section from Joe where Joe joined me, and then you and I will circle back and we'll talk more about kind of why this album is important, because it's important to me, and I from what I know of you, I think this is important to you as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little history about this, then we'll play the Joe section, and then you and I will talk a little more. So as far as my research is concerned, Skalleluia was their second album from the group, and I think as most people know, it's just full of ska versions of popular praise and worship songs. Sales-wise, this was a huge hit, and I had kind of forgotten how much of a hit this was. So this thing charted on the Billboard Top 200. It hit 200, which I know is not crazy, but for a Christian ska band to hit the Billboard Hot 200, I think that's pretty incredible. On the Heat Seekers, it was 15, and then on the Contemporary Christian, it was number 8.
I didn't realize it had been that high either, but that is impressive.
Yeah, I think this was a big deal. This wasn't just like a throwaway album. I think this really did capture something, because number 8 on the Contemporary Christian charts is pretty high, in my opinion.
One, I just had to look it up myself that it was 1998, I guess. Yep. It came out, because I couldn't remember exactly what year. Which album is that? The album, or when did the Insyderz win a Dove Award? Because I know I've heard Joe talk about winning a Dove Award. Is that what they've got a Dove Award for?
Yep, that's this album, okay. Their version of Awesome God, and I think even that captures, because this is right after this album comes out, fairly shortly after Rich Mullins passing away. So I think that also kind of did play into this. It's a good selection, in that was a really, that was a moment in contemporary Christian music when Rich Mullins passed away. So I think it kind of hit that well. And yeah, they won a Dove Award for this, for the hard music recording song of the year is the category they won in. But
yeah.
And that was they won that in 1999, so it was a year after this album came over.
Music.
Yeah, very hard. Yeah. But yeah, I'd kind of forgotten how big of a hit this was. This wasn't just the ska and punk kids and the alternative kids. This really feels like it permeated at least some of the contemporary Christian music at the time as well.
Yeah, and my understanding, now I never saw the Insyderz, and I wish I had. Like, I was even at a Cornerstone Festival where they played, but the rest of my youth group that I went there with did not want to go see them, so I had to see some other stupid band. But my understanding is the Insyderz did a lot of these like hymns and things, so it's not like this was an unnatural thing for them to, put out an album of, praise songs, because they actually did, I guess, at a lot of their shows, songs like this. At least because I've heard Joe talk about that before.
Yeah, and that is the first question I'm going to ask Joe. Is I
Okay.
I want to hear about that, because I think I'll say it in that section as well. But like, I'm super cynical about worship music at this point. Like, I feel like it's just become this machine that's just pumping out songs to make money. And I know that's a super cynical view, but I think that view has gone back in time, because I think a lot of people look at worship music from the 90s and 2000s and kind of start putting that viewpoint on it. And so like I'm totally cynical, and I think a lot of people are. I think these Skalleluia albums have not aged as well because of the current worship marketplace.
And I don't know if this is this might almost be too personal. I recently, in the last year, went out on a date via, whatever, Facebook dating. And this lady I went on a date with, we got to talking about music, because I think that's, an interesting and good thing to sort of connect on. And she is like really into like some of the worship music stuff, and that was like not. I'm like, oh, I am also into Christian music, but a completely different way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was not really a way that we ended up bonding.
That's funny.
Because though I did, and I thought it was a good like sort of get to know each other technique when we were just messaging each other. Like, give each other 5 songs to listen to of, like, your favorite songs. And, so yeah, I was forced to listen to some of that stuff, which wasn't horrible, but it was not my cup of tea. So, yeah, but I also am not really into, like, the current scene of Christian music, if there is one, seems to be dominated by this sort of, like, worship music stuff that I do not think is all that great.
Yep. And
that's my take.
I think that it has impacted people's view of these 2 Skalleluia albums, because I think there's no way around it. Because when I go back and listen to them, I think I even felt it myself, because I more recently went back to them and like, Caleb, try and put yourself back in 1998. And as I listen to this, I'm like, this is great. These are so fun. And so it's totally there. And man, I haven't had that experience dating, but I've had that experience at church where like people are like, "Oh, you're into music? Do you love King and Country? They're just the greatest." And I'm like, I don't. Nope, it's not for me.
I have tried to explain to people. I'm like, look, back in like the 90s and early 2000s, there was this whole like microcosm where Christian music had all sorts of like variety.
Yep.
And now it's like as if it's been, they just strained out all the good stuff.
Yep.
And you're left with like the most bland, like commercially acceptable stuff that, within that industry, within like the Christian music industry, like commercially acceptable stuff that, that's so, people, a lot of people don't know that, that there was this whole scene that existed. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump into the Joe segment. And sorry, I haven't recorded it yet, so Todd's he's gonna not have any recollection of what Joe says till this comes out.
I was curious.
Here, behind the scenes, I haven't recorded that yet. We're meeting later this week, so this is a real behind the scenes look at how you throw together a podcast. But let's throw to that segment, and then you and I'll jump back in, and we'll talk more about this album specifically and just kind of what it means, and any other random things we want to talk about. So me and Todd will be back in a minute. Well, I just want to welcome Joe to the show. Joe, thanks so much. Lead singer of the Insyderz. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you here.
Heck yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked. We just talked about it briefly. I get just as excited to be on shows as as anybody. So I'm stoked that that you dropped me a line and asked me to do this.
Yeah. Well, and the show is, and kind of what I do is just kind of post about album anniversaries and kind of the anniversary of the release date. And Skalleluia was coming up, and I was going to talk about it anyway. And so I was like, oh, let's make a bigger show out of it. Talk to somebody else actually talked for like an hour about a myriad of things, but he kind of joined the show. So just doing a little special show on Skalleluia and kind of what it meant to us. And then you were gracious enough to come on. So super excited to talk to you about that. I
Oh,
think
cool.
26 years, you're right. 1998, I think
Yeah.
May 5th, I think is what I want to, I'm not looking at any notes in front of me. So I think
We
May
we
5th.
always tried to release on Cinco de Mayo. We just because what
Why not?
better way to listen to a new album than burrito, listen, diarrhea?
Exactly.
That's kind of how
That
we
was
fit
the
into
mission
history.
statement of the band
Yeah.
album.
Yeah, refried beans, diarrhea, listen to the album, not necessarily in that order.
You pick the order. You get to decide.
Yeah. It's a crapshoot, literally. Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. One of the things that I've thought about is like I know that like today there's a lot of cynicism towards worship music, and I'm probably guilty of it myself. I think a lot of people see it as just part of this machine to crank out music to make money. And I feel like that's even kind of had an influence on how people see old worship music and old kind of worship albums. But like for you guys, this wasn't some sort of fad or money grab. If I remember correctly, like worship music was a part of the Insyderz history. So
Yeah.
can you tell me, just tell us a little bit about that history of that you guys had with worship music?
Yeah, for sure. And so like when the Insyderz started, we were a ska band and we knew what we wanted to do. And we just didn't like one day all of us friends get together in a basement and start cranking out original stuff.
Sure.
So we got together and we were all kind of members of the praise band for
Hmm.
our youth group. And we were like, so we were just practicing like the praise and worship songs that were popular in like 1993, 94, 95.
Yeah.
What we sang at youth group, we would just kind of what we call scod them up. And so that's how we practiced is we would practice kind of honing our skills and figuring out like, okay, well, our guitar player really likes the reggae style and he can play that, and our bass player, he can play more of this style. And so that's what we did is to say it again, we honed our skills,
Hmm.
kind of just playing praise and worship. Then we started writing our own stuff. Well, when we first started getting gigs, like booking shows, we would like go to a club and we were playing with like Mustard Plug and
Yeah.
Parka Kings and Johnny Sacco, Blue Meanies. And we would go and we'd play with them and we would have 20 minutes to open, and we would play our like three songs, which would take 10 minutes to play three songs. And we were like, oh crap, like what do? We don't have any more songs. And so people want more. And
Yeah.
I mean, the promoter tells you got 20 minutes and you play 10 and bolt, you're never playing there again.
Sure.
So I think Nate was like, he has made me glad. And we were like, okay, let's do it. So then we ripped off like our three praise and worship songs, finished the set. People were like, oh, that's cool. Because what was always cool back then is, and still to this day, is you get up and play and there's always someone who comes up that like, by judging a book by its cover, you had no clue that this person was like a Christian.
Hmm.
And they would come up and be like, dude, that was awesome. Like, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, like I hear these songs in church. And like I said, judging the book, you'd be like, you would never pick that guy out of the crowd.
Yeah.
And so we would do that at our shows. Then it kind of became a thing where at the end of our sets, we would play a few praise and worship songs.
Hmm.
So long story short, fast forward to Motor City Ska, our first original album came out. It comes out and like our true fans, our fans who had been there from the beginning when we were playing for 5 people, they were like, oh man, we thought, he has made me glad. We thought, Lord, I lift your name on high. We thought, I got the joy.
Yeah.
We thought those were going to be on this album. And after we had heard that 100 times, we thought to ourselves, like, okay, we need to make a praise and worship album, kind of like a love letter to our fans. And so that was the idea of
Hmm.
everybody that comes to our shows, they love this portion of it. And so we want to give them what they want. And if they want to be waking up in the morning and showering or driving to school or driving to work and listening to it, that's what we want them to have. We want them to worship with us. And so
Yeah.
that's how Skalleluia came about. And was through that is we were just putting together an album. You would use the word like a money grab. It wasn't. It was 18-year-olds saying we put out this original album, and our fans like desire like this over here, and so
Yeah.
that's what we did. Is so we put that out for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really cool because like, again, like I said, I think people are really, and I totally am. I'm totally cynical towards a lot of the music I hear at church. And I want to hear old hymns because that's just my preference in general. And so I do feel like it's really kind of cool to hear that was such an organic process that it just really
Yeah,
came out of that desire. Because I think even for a while, like even 10 years ago, I'd listen to this album, these albums, both the Skalleluias, and I'd be like, oh, it's just praise and worship. And then I was kind of like, I kind of got to put myself back in 1998 and how excited I was for these albums that came out because I was like, this is amazing. I think
yeah,
just worn down from 20 years of at times I'd say generic bad worship music, and there's some great stuff out there, but there's also some really I think I understand the cynicism that some people have. So I think even some of these old worship albums have gotten caught up in that cynicism and kind of are
yeah.
looked at negatively now.
Yeah, I get caught up in it too. I mean, if you want to fast forward a few years, Skalleluia 2, that probably is borderline, depending on what day you catch me on. I'm going to say that was a money grab, or I'm going to
Sure.
say that was borderline money grab. We can be bitter, and you can critique that and be as cynical as you want with that album.
Right.
But Skalleluia
Hmm.
it was teenagers just trying to be just different. Because again, in
Yeah.
2024, it's weird to talk about it, but like in 1995 and in 1994, like that's not how it was, right?
Yeah.
So like you went and your praise and worship band was, if you were lucky, it was bass, guitar, and drums.
Yeah.
And it was good old like basically like Stephen Curtis Chapman, like contemporary worship. And when you're like an angsty teen and you're listening to a style of music, or you could do that, the fact that we had the freedom, the fact that we
Yeah.
had the like wherewithal to try and do it. I mean, in all honesty, we weren't sitting there like, you guys, I think we got something big. Like we weren't that smart. We were just literally taking what we practiced and we put it on tape.
Right.
And so like you use the word organic. It was just total. We
Yeah.
stumbled into it. Like this is what we do. This is what we've done, and we put it out there.
Right.
And I've heard people say that the Insyderz have like kind of started that whole revolution of praise and worship, where like metal bands would put out like a metal praise and
Yeah.
worship, and like an industrial or like a house would do something. And the cynical side of me, I've gone through all of that in my life. And on Sinner's Songbook, I believe it was Sinner's Songbook, maybe it was Soundtrack to a Revolution. One of the last songs, I think it was Soundtrack. The last song is called Shame on Me.
Yeah.
And basically that song was written because of me kind of being judgy
Hmm.
towards everybody else's ministries. And
Yeah.
what convicted me, it's kind of funny, just a quick story here. What convicted me is I was making fun of a woman one day. She was no longer doing it. She had done this ministry like 20 years earlier, but it was a puppet ministry.
Hmm.
And I was kind of joking and making fun of this woman and being like, how stupid. Like she had a puppet ministry. Like, and here I thought the Insyderz was like the end all be all for like, someone finding Jesus through music.
Right.
And like, who am I? And so that's where it came about. Like, shame
Hmm.
on me to think that like my crappy band was the way that it should have been done. And so like the person who puts out the like Celtic praise, or the
Right.
person who puts out the grindcore praise and worship, like, yeah, you can look at the coin like it's a money grab, But
Right.
you can also look at the other side of the coin and be like, these are metalheads that don't want to hear Skalleluia.
Right.
Like they want to hear grindcore praise and worship. And who cares? Like who else cares, man?
Right.
If someone, the Bible tells us if we don't worship, the rocks will cry out.
Right.
And if metalheads want to sit there wearing their Reebok high tops and stonewashed jeans and denim jackets and big permed and hairsprayed hair, and they want to worship to that, then man, awesome.
Right.
So and I'm not saying this to like knock you or anything like this. This is all me talking to me. And a lot of times I have to talk myself back down because I start to inflate. And then I'm like, no, 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 no. I've been
Yeah.
humbled before many a time. So
Yeah.
I have to bring myself back down.
Well, shame on you. Great closing. I love closing tracks to albums, so it's a great closing track to my
Oh,
favorite
thanks, man.
Insyderz album, Soundtrack to a Revolution.
Oh,
It's my
I love it too.
my favorite one. So it's funny you mentioned like you guys were like, well, we didn't know if we had something big, but did you guys realize how big it was? Because it was kind of a big hit back in the day. I mean, won the Dove Award. I mean, it moved some
Yeah.
units. Did you guys
Yeah,
realize
it
what you
did.
had when it was going on?
I think we knew what we had when Steve Taylor and Squint really, we were caught in like a record contract nightmare.
Yeah.
And when Steve Taylor, Christian music Hall of Famer, amazing dude, stepped in with all of his army
Yeah.
and plucked us out. And somehow, I still don't know how this worked, but he got like our record contract like paused, and we
Yeah.
were able to go with Squint for a one album deal and
Hmm.
do Skalleluia. And when I saw like the backing that, they wanted photo shoots and they wanted videos and the excitement that was on Steve Taylor and
Yeah.
that came, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I think we do have something here. However, the weird part of that is remember the reason we were putting it out was to give like this present to our fans.
Yeah.
And that's where it got weird, was like you're doing it for one thing and suddenly it's like we can do this with it and we can go here and we can do this and we can do videos and we can do, and you're like, whoa, 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 like that's not what it was intended. But I mean,
Yeah.
if that's the way it's going, like so be it, if more people want it. And
Yeah.
so that's what was crazy about it, is this thing that wasn't talked about in a boardroom,
Yeah.
wasn't sat and, hey, we're going to do this, 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 and market this, this, this. We put it together. We had it. And then it ended up, say we made it for 5,000 people, it ended up, 100,000 people liked it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because one of the comments I got on Twitter was that I guess Steve Taylor in some interview is like the success of Skalleluia really funded the success of Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer. Like because they did do so well on it, they were like, well, hey, we can take some of this money and pump it into this other thing that we think is
Oh,
also a
heck
hit.
yeah.
And so it was on some podcast. Steve was talking about that. So I was like, oh, that's great that
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
That's awesome.
I can't remember what it was. It was like it was some podcast, but somebody hit me up and they were like, "Did you know this relationship?" And I was like, "I had no idea."
That's
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, man. That's cool to hear those things. I think that's
Yeah.
so cool.
So you kind of mentioned like how some of these songs were chosen. Do you have any favorites from that album, or just from back in the day from that Skalleluia album?
Yeah, I mean, I remember my favorites back then. One of my favorites to this day is the lead track, Lord You're Beautiful.
Hmm.
And even when we played Furnace Fest just a few months ago,
Yeah.
we came out to that. So that was
Nice.
always like a good starter to come out to. I've always been one that likes that like less than Jake kind of ska sound.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and Lord You're Beautiful was very less than Jake sounding, and I loved it. I remember the three, like when I talked about we had three praise and worship songs, the three first ones, if I'm remembering right, were He Has Made Me Glad, Lord I Lift Your Name on High, and Joy.
Okay.
Those were the three that we had like practiced.
Okay.
And then from there, when we knew that we were going to be doing an album, that's where we kind of started like, I think what we did, because we did this occasionally on albums like this, for this, Skalleluia 2, for our like covers and things like that. Everybody would like bring two songs to the table.
Hmm.
So there were six of us in the band. So 12 songs would kind of go in. We'd work on the 12 and then we kind of pick,
Okay.
pick and choose what we wanted. And so, there's a few on there like Bo, our bass player. He brought, I believe, Who Is This? Is Who Is This on Skalleluia?
That's on Skalleluia too, I think.
Is that Skalleluia too? Let me pull up Skalleluia. So, Jesus Draw Me Close and Jesus Draw Me Close. I remember that was a Bo one. Awesome God was real big at the time, and we loved it, and we loved playing it like at church, and we hated the verses. We're
Sure.
like, this is a great song, like the chorus, and we were like, again, as teenagers, we were like, we could do this chorus like hardcore and go crazy, but the verses suck. And so me thinking I was like amazing, I was like, I can write really cool verses. So I wrote verses that I don't know, it fit our style, I guess, but that that as the kids say, the chorus just slaps. I don't know if the kids still say that, but
I don't know
so
either.
so just going over these, like Lord, You're Beautiful. I love it. He Has Made Me Glad. I remember playing that. That was in my church, a real popular one growing up in my
Hmm.
church. And now I listen to it. It's very corny.
Sure.
But back then I liked it. And back then it was, it was part of our repertoire.
Yeah.
Awesome God was great. Lord, I Lift Your Name on High was great. Jesus Draw Me Close. I think that's a Keith Green song. I
I
think.
think so. There's
And
two of them, I think, in the middle. Oh, maybe not.
was Jesus' name above all? No, I don't know. Well,
Wait a
then we
minute.
got Ancient of Days. That was another one that I sang growing up at my church.
Okay.
You Are My All in All. Jesus' Name Above All Names. And then that one leads into it's Name Above All Names and then another one. I think there's two songs mixed there. Oops, I just started it. Then we got The Joy, We Will Glorify. I didn't know that song. I didn't know
Okay.
Morning into Dancing. I did not know that song like prior to this. I didn't know Jesus Draw Me Close prior. So it's like when guys started bringing stuff to the table, a lot of them I was just listening to for the first time. And
Sure.
so that's kind of how the songs were picked, is like what's popular at the time. Can we do it better? And I'm one of those people that still to this day, how you said, some people talk about when they hear a praise and worship song, they think of the Insyderz version. To
Yeah.
this day, I just turned 47 on Monday, and to this day, I will be in church and hear a praise and worship song, and I'm like, that would sound better if when we hit the chorus, the trombone comes in and we hit it hard. Like I still listen to praise and worship songs and think like, oh my gosh, I'd love to do it our way.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
still, man, it's still in me.
Did you guys do like full worship set? Like after this came out, would you or you guys were always mixing? I feel like you guys were always mixing in both, but did you ever do like sets where it's just like, hey, we're just only going to do worship sets?
I can't remember, but I think we did. I think
Okay.
occasionally, um, so when we would tour, we made sure that we played a show every single day.
Sure.
Because our thinking was if we were on tour, let's be playing shows. We don't want a day where we're losing money. And when I
Yeah.
say losing money, I mean like if we have a Monday off and we're sitting in some podunk town paying for a hotel, paying for food, all that stuff, we might as well be playing for somebody.
Yeah.
And if we can make $50 selling shirts and CDs, that at least pays for gas to the next city.
Yeah.
So we always try to play. And I do remember there were times where there was a big church in like Dallas, and then I
Hmm.
think also in California, occasionally some of those mega churches, they would bring us in on like a Saturday night. So we would
Yeah.
be like a Saturday night concert for the teens in the city. And then on Sunday morning, I know it happened, I would say no more than 5 times,
Sure.
but I think definitely more than once. And then like Sunday morning, we would play for like the church.
Right.
It was so weird. Like I remember like being in like church, like adults and like 80-year-old people sitting in like in the chairs, like, who are these morons? And
Right.
like we get up there and start playing, and it's praise and worship, but people are just like, oh, this is garbage.
It's probably
Yeah,
just totally thrown off.
we ruined some Sunday mornings.
That's great. Sorry to ruin your Sunday.
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny. So, in this age of vinyl and all that stuff, do you know who owns kind of which pieces? Because you guys had a number of record companies. Do you know who owns Skalleluia? And just in general, I know the last album you guys own, but like, do you know who kind of owns the rights to Insyderz music?
You know what? I'm embarrassed to say no, I don't. I
Okay.
believe our drummer Nate does.
Okay.
I don't. I never got into the business end of things.
Sure.
Nate has to call me and be like, hey, our like BMI royalties are up this year. You have to go back in and like re-register.
Okay.
And like I have to be told that. I'm so bad. Like if I never got another royalty check, I don't even think I'd think about it.
Sure.
And it's not like they're huge or anything like that, but I mean it's something.
Right.
So I never got involved because when we started the band, we always said when this becomes a job, we'll quit.
Sure.
And we did. It became a job and we quit.
Yeah.
And so that was just our mantra. And then when we realized, hey, this is a job, this isn't fun anymore.
Sure.
That's when we stopped. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay away from that. Like we had a manager, we had the record company, we had guys in the band that wanted their fingers in those pies.
Right.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to just go out and have fun. I just wanted to write. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to meet people.
Yeah.
I wanted to eat good food, and all the different cities and stuff like that. So that I don't know.
Okay.
I would love to do vinyl. I mean, I had a midlife crisis, and when I turned 40 and I bought a record player, and I have a really good kind of vinyl collection. It's not large, but
Right.
it's good.
Yeah.
It's steak and not just a bunch of sizzle. So I would love for our stuff to be on vinyl, but I don't know. A guy had contacted us about doing it, and I don't know. And like it kind of came time to pull the trigger, and I was like, dude, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
talk to Nate. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it just kind of panics me. I have no clue.
It does get complicated because I think a lot of people want to do it, but I know Tooth and Nail's ownership is all messed up in a lot of ways because they sold off of everything pre 2005 to get a better distribution deal. So like pre 2005, Tooth and Nail doesn't own anything. So I think it can really, really get complicated because I think you hear the comment all the time, like, oh, you guys are going to repress that on vinyl. It's like, not as simple as y'all think.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, being like self-deprecating, like putting that aside, it's not like the suicide machines are printing destruction by definition on vinyl and you're like, I gotta have that. Yes, I know we have Insyderz fans, but the way vinyl is and
Yeah.
kind of how much you have to press for certain, I'm
Totally.
thinking like if you had to buy a box, like who's going to spend $150 on like 5 Insyder albums pressed on? Like that ain't happening. I wouldn't spend it.
I would.
You know
I
what I
totally
mean?
would.
Oh, well, you're awesome. So, okay. So we got one.
You got
So now
one.
if we press one box set, it's going to cost you $1,500 for that, So
okay, you've outpriced
just-
yourself.
Exactly. So I just don't see, I mean, in all honesty, I just don't see people buying it. Like it's one of those things where you have it digitally, you could turn it on digitally, you can listen to it whenever you want.
Yeah.
But I don't know about spending that money to put on Motor City Ska or Skalleluia.
I think you kind of have to
vinyl.
hit a moment. Like there has to be like something that ignites it and it's kind of it works. And I think it works
Yeah.
for some bands. And it's one of those ones where I did think about it when I was playing it this week. I was upstairs cooking and my kids were around and I was like, oh, I'm playing this. And I was like, oh, this would be a fun one to have on vinyl, I think. But I totally get it. So it's just a question that now I start thinking about with a lot of these bands that have, not really been
like
been around for a while.
I wouldn't buy 5 Irons box set.
No,
like
not
that's
a
garbage.
chance.
That's a waste of money. So say like if I want to put on a Handbook for a Sellout I'll just throw it on the old Bluetooth speaker from the phone, and like, I don't need Five Irons box set on vinyl. Don't need it. I love Blink 182, but I
Sure.
don't necessarily need all their albums on vinyl. So
Right.
I'm very picky and
Yeah.
stuff with what I get on vinyl. And I just don't think Insyderz would pop with people. I think whoever invested and went through all the hard work to figure out who owns it, and I think it would be a big flop.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot of effort to figure it out just because
You go, yeah. You know what? You're right.
No, I would.
You know what,
totally
Joe?
be
Now
in.
that you put it that way, you're right.
Oh, fail. You can tell I'm amateur podcaster. Oh,
That's
man.
awesome.
Well, Joe, I can't say thanks enough just for taking the time to join me and talk about this album again. Still, I think one of my favorites, and as I've grown older, I think the album has grown on me more, even in my later years. So I can't say thanks enough for joining me. So yeah,
I can't thank you enough for having me again. I love doing this. It's a blessing to me. When I was in the Insyderz, I took it for granted. I took what we did for granted, and I didn't stop and smell the roses.
Huh.
And it's years later when you have regret that you have all those things, that doing a show like this, that talking to one person that enjoys this or enjoyed what I did and the art that was made, it makes me feel like $1,000,000. And when you're 47 years old and you're busting your hump every day at work, and you're trying to pay for your kid's graduation party and all that stuff, just to go back and reminisce, it's amazing, and it makes me feel amazing. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, glad to have you, man. Well, again, I want to thank Joe, and I'll probably thank him at the end for joining me. Like we said, Todd didn't actually get to listen to it because the magic of podcasts, but you were saying off the air, you've actually interviewed Joe before, so this is old hat for you.
Yeah, it's weird because it wasn't an actual sit-down interview, but I ran in the early 2000s. Like, I think we started in 2004, and it maybe sort of went defunct around 2009. Christian Ska Forum, which is like a very niche thing. And also, forums still exist, but not nearly like they did in the 90s and early 2000s because of social media,
For
right?
sure.
Like, I don't know, 2004, 2005, like Facebook really took off. Because I remember the days when Facebook, you actually had to be a college student. You had to have a .edu email address. Anyway, those things take off. Forums sort of die out, so that killed our website. But yeah, I ran a Christian ska website. It was mostly a forum where we could like support local ska bands and stuff. And one time, we just collected questions from the forum, and I sent them all to Joe, and he, emailed me back his response to all the questions.
Okay.
So that was probably about 20 years ago.
So 2004 to 2009, that's a really interesting time period because ska is, in the mainstream, ska is dead. You're getting a little here and there.
Yeah, I was definitely late to the game. Yeah, it was not the best time. There were still people. Like, I had one band that I probably only know because of that website was Send Out Scuds, which was a Christian ska band from Florida.
Yeah.
Because one of their members really got active on our forum.
That's crazy.
For example. So, like, I knew, and there's another band from California, one from Chicago. I just got to know some random local ska bands from around the country because that was the whole idea was, hey, let's have a forum where we can talk about Christian ska and I can sort of help get these names out there. And I sold t-shirts. That was how I basically paid for the whole thing. So there's like about 100, because I had 100 of them made, like random Ska for Christ t-shirts around the planet. Because like I even shipped like 20 of them, like some people in Germany put together. Because apparently people heard about my website. Like I sent 20 of them to Germany for a group of people. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I obviously if I would have started that, 5 or so years before. But yeah, it was, and I don't know how much this is interesting. The main reason I did start it in 2004 was I was involved with Campus Crusade at that time. And Campus Crusade, and this is just, I don't know, a weird quirk about my own history, something people might not expect. Campus Crusade had a ministry, like they had within Campus Crusade sort of branches to focus on different like demographic groups. And I was actually involved in Impact, the Impact movement, which was the African-American, basically, version of Campus Crusade. And I went to multiple Impact conferences. It was a big part of my college experience. And after basically going to one of the national conferences, I believe in Atlanta or Washington, D.C., I forget what year it was, I just, and they would get like big name, like, Christian hip hop acts like Cross Movement performed usually each time. And that experience made me think, well, hey, I've always been really into like Christian ska. Maybe I can start something related to that. Like going and seeing, like all these other college students really on fire and, excited to see like Cross Movement made me think, I should start like as something related to like my own interests, and that's how I ended up starting a Christian ska forum.
That is crazy.
In 2004.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Who knew that Cross Movement would inspire more discussion about Christian ska? I don't think that was their intention.
Exactly. Yeah. If someone goes and asks like the ambassador or some other guy from Cross Movement, did you know? No. You just see him like his face just falls. He just is like, what have I done? What have I done? Oh man. There was and I'm obviously you can edit this out. There was great. There was this guy. So my college, like many universities, had a radio network, right? I mean a radio program, a radio station.
Yeah.
I was losing that word for a second. So my college had a radio station, and one of my friends that was involved with Impact, his name was Kendrick. He was one of the DJs on our college radio station, and he was like a really big hip hop head. And it was so funny because I think I wanted to give him one of my Ska for Christ shirts, and he would not. And the funny thing was, he liked it. Like, he would listen to the music, but he's like, I cannot be associated with, like, ska music. So, yeah.
That is awesome. Oh my
He's like, God. I, as a black man, cannot be associated with this ska website. Yeah,
which is
all sorts of like ironic.
Yeah,
in a way. But yeah,
I mean, because really, ska's roots are in Jamaica and out of Jamaica. Yeah. I know it has been. There's nowhere. I mean, I'm not going to try and the whole everything that did happen in the 90s. I totally get why people are like, this is just nerdy white people music. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. The roots of it are so deep in that culture. So yeah, it's funny.
When I ran Ska for Christ, I wrote like little article sort of things. Like I had one on like Rastafarianism and like Haile Selassie and stuff. Yeah, so like, yeah, I am into those roots. Yeah, and I wish I still had it. There was a nice little multi-CD compilation on like the history of ska and reggae that I had a lot of like roots ska stuff like 15 years ago. Those CDs are probably still somewhere. I just need to find them. But yeah.
Yeah, I've Trojan Records, which was like a ska reggae label from Jamaica. Yeah. They put out some really, really good compilations. They're called like This Is Trojan Something. Yeah. So it's great. So yeah. So I think a lot of people know of like the Israelites, like the Christian, band. Are you familiar with like Christafari, which was like a Christian like reggae band? I've heard of them. Yeah. I think I've probably heard them a couple times.
This is going far afield but no, because it's all going back to that whole like time in my life. Christafari, a lot of their like merch and stuff, I think more than even listening to them, I like some of their merch because like they tied together like the sort of Jamaican themes and like the Christian themes. So like I had a WWJD bracelet back in my college years, but it was in like Rasta colors. Like it was a little, like a hand beaded little, like,
Okay.
WWJD bracelet. So yeah. That was my time in college. Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. I think that's a great connection. And so I'll do it now. You and I are working on doing another show or another episode where we're going to kind of break down kind of our favorite Christian ska artists or bands of all time or whatever. It's not from all time. We're just going to kind of try and do that. Yeah. We're trying to get one other person to join us as well. So yeah, that's kind of a little plug for that show. And you can tell I've picked the right person to join me to talk about 32 Christian ska bands that no one has heard of. So yeah, that is something that is in the works. I've been talking about that for a while, but I think we finally found our third. We had somebody else had to drop out. So that show is to come eventually. It'll be on the feed at some point. I don't know when I'll actually get it out and get it done, but we need to do that. So I clearly have chosen the right person to join me in that discussion.
I will have to publish it somewhere. This is another point I mentioned when we were sort of off air, I guess, was we actually compiled a list of Christian ska bands that people knew of on our forum. And I do have that saved in like a Google Doc because I found it using the Wayback Machine recently. So
yeah,
I'm going to have to publish this list of like Christian ska bands that like nobody has ever heard of that we compiled like 15 years ago.
Well, I've got one that I'm excited to mention because I know he occasionally, there's a Minnesota one, and I know he occasionally listens. So I'm excited to give them a shout out on that show as well. Perfect. Even though I don't think they never produced any actual media that people could consume, but I'm excited to do that. So. Nice. Well, that's awesome. So that's also a good lead into, I know we'll talk probably more on that show about kind of just your history with ska. We've already gotten a little bit of it, but just kind of how you got into it. So we'll go into that on that show. What I want to know is specifically to Skalleluia, do you kind of remember kind of where you were at when this album came out? So it came out, like you said, 1998, May 5th is the release date. This show is going to come out a little after May 5th just because of scheduling. But so, do you remember kind of where you're at in May of 1998? And was this something that you knew right away? Or was this kind of like 2 years later, I've discovered the Insyderz and Skalleluia or that sort of thing?
I was in junior high.
Okay.
In May of 98. I suppose I was at the end of a school year.
Were you listening to like ska music at the time?
It's hard for me to like nail down. But yes, I would have already been listening to the Insyderz.
Okay.
So here's a tidbit. The very first album that I ever purchased with my own money was Motor City Ska by the Insyderz.
Nice.
So yeah, I was already listening to the Insyderz. I was definitely within that culture of, shopping for records at the Christian bookstore. So I would go to Lemstone's Christian Books, which was a chain, and they had a location in the mall near me. So I think I literally went in there at one point and just was, listening, because they had those little listening stations, and I listened to the Insyderz, Motor City Ska, and I bought it. And that was basically the beginning. And I decided at some point in there to be a ska kid. Because, that was, from then on, most of what I listened to was ska, and especially Christian ska. I was one of the people who predominantly listened to Christian music. I would say that pretty much all Christian or just oldies.
Sure.
Like, I don't know if that might be a common combination. Like, maybe my parents felt like that's pretty safe, right? Like, you can listen to the oldies station.
Yeah.
Like, you can listen to the Beatles and whatever else comes on, like the oldies station.
Right. Listen to the Beatles where they talk about drugs.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like, man, how many songs have I listened to on the oldies station? I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. Which some people think is a song about drugs. There's some debate about that. But anyway, that's a random example of, there's lots of stuff going on. But anyway, yes, I listened to oldies and Christian ska, basically. I mean, I listened to other Christian music, but ska was like the center. So, I mean, people gave me like the first album that like the first sort of adult music I ever got was Jars of Clay, self-titled on tape. Then the first CD I ever was given was Free at Last by DC Talk.
Okay.
And then, but the first one I bought myself was the Insyderz Motor City Ska. So I would soon after Skalleluia came out, I would be going to my first Cornerstone.
Okay.
At which I bought multiple pieces of Insyderz merch, and I saw Joe at the merch table.
Okay.
But yeah, I can't really pinpoint exactly when I first picked up Motor City Ska, but it would have been probably at my local Christian bookstore, just because I was into, Christian ska in general by then.
Yeah.
And speaking of in general, I was also listening to MXPX as well. I know they're not ska, but somehow it all fits together.
Oh, it totally does. Totally does. So
yeah.
Were you then connected? So me and my friends were connected to, we would go to the Christian bookstore because we had one in our city as well. And then we started getting 7-ball. So it wasn't just that we would, because the listening station, I think, is a real thing from us 90s kids. I'm a little older than you are, but that idea of going in and just kind of randomly grabbing something off the wall and trying to see if this is something you'd like, or looking at those ridiculous posters. But then then it did become a scene where I remember anticipating albums. Did you start to get connected in that way, or is it more still just a lot of show up and see what's there?
A little bit. I definitely would get issues of 7-ball.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know what happened. That's something I am sad about. Things that I had collected that I've lost over the years. There was the cover of, I think, 7-ball that had the big three, pictures of the Supertones, 5 Iron Frenzy, and the Insyderz. I took that cover and just had it on my wall as a mini poster, you know. I will always remember in 7-ball, I don't know who wrote the article, but there was an article about the Insyderz, and I might not remember these all exactly right, but it was this long series of, they described the Insyderz musical style as something like ska, neo-punk, rap, metal, surfcore.
Okay.
I was like, that seems about right. Ska, neo-punk, rap, metal, surfcore, I think it was. Because, a ska band can sort of play anything.
I agree.
You got all the instrumentation. In fact, I really love when Real Big Fish, they will do at a concert this act where they play the same song in multiple 10 different musical styles, like country and metal and whatever.
Yes.
And the Insyderz could do the same thing, I think, if they so chose. So, but that was so I was into 7-ball. I remember, I think it was geared towards college students. There was the magazine Campus Life that was a Christian magazine. But I think they would also talk about music sometimes. Yeah, I was into that stuff. But I think I mostly just sort of, would go check the bookstore, though, and be like, oh, is there anything new that fits in this section that I am interested in?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, what a glorious time in some ways to be able to just go and have a little section of the Christian bookstore that you could dig through to find stuff.
I mean, that's obviously how I found, I mentioned MXPX, and that's how I found, 5 Iron Frenzy, the Supertones. Why Motor City Ska was the first one that caught my eye, I really don't know. All I know is that was the one that, one day I went into that bookstore, I saw Motor City Ska, and I picked it up. So I was definitely excited that Skalleluia had come out, just because it meant more of the Insyderz.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, so you had mentioned you listened to this album a lot when you were younger. I mean, so what was there stuff that attracted you to this album when you were younger? We'll talk about how it hits us now, but
I think I was definitely more into worship type music, hymns and stuff then. I mean, I still am. But it sort of has to be hit me in the right mood or whatever. Or if it's, I definitely I like Christmas songs.
I love Christmas songs.
Which is sort of in a similar vein, but sort of different too. But I would go and play it. I remember, because I was definitely a kid who was sort of at church a lot. Right? Because not only did I go to church on Sundays, I went to youth group on Wednesdays, and also my dad was the chair of our church's elder board, and like sort of a lay minister guy. Like he was often the guy, if the pastor was out of town or out sick or whatever, my dad preached and stuff. So I was heavily involved in church. I just remember, and I say that to say, I specifically remember playing Skalleluia on a boombox, like in one of the activity rooms at my church when I was like a kid. Yeah. Like that's like my memory of listening to it was, I specifically remember this one classroom at the church, like when it was empty though. Like I was there because my dad was in a meeting or something.
Sure.
And I just remember like hanging out listening to this album on a boombox at the church. So
well, that's great. That was one of my other questions, like specific memories, because I'll tell you my specific memory of this album is, so I've said I'm a little older than you are. I was in college when this album came out, and I've talked about my college experience was really interesting because, again, in high school, I had kind of a number of buddies who were into the same stuff. We liked MXPX, Five Iron, In the Insyderz, kind of all those alternative bands. I go to college, and I did eventually meet a couple guys who were into it, but I was the overwhelming, for my first couple years in college, I was the weird guy. I was the only punk kid. I was involved in Campus Crusade as well, but I was the only punk kid. I was the only kid into ska, and I got literally made fun of at Campus Crusade for enjoying those. And I remember this album in particular, it's the, and Joe's talked about this on their show, The Pickle and Boot Shop, like that he kind of found his voice later in their albums. Like he didn't always feel like he was allowed to sing the way he wanted to. And I remember the song You Are My All in All, I remember one of my friends making fun of that song because he's like, his vocals are so stupid on this album, on this song. It's so stupid. Why is he singing that way? So that's a very specific memory I have of this album that really ties into my college experience, which my college experience, it wasn't bad by any means, but when it came to music, I was like ridiculed for my love of these kinds of bands. So that's a memory I have.
I've definitely been made fun of. And heck, even now, I sort of bristle almost when someone someone else, I will overhear someone else describing me, right?
Right.
And someone says like, oh, he listens to Christian rock music.
Right.
Like, I'm almost like, yeah. Like, why do you have to put it like that?
Right.
But, yeah. So, funny enough, I think I've always had a tendency to not really give a crap, Because funny you say how, you were always the weird kid. I mean, I feel like a lot of us, and that's been an interesting thing about getting to know this sort of online CCM community.
Yeah.
Is I feel like a lot of us were like a weird person, right?
Yeah.
So like it is interesting to bring us all together. But yeah, my mom, I remember specifically one time, I don't know if she was concerned. She actually like told me once, like, maybe you should try to get more into music that most other kids like, so that like, because like, I think she thought that I was going to be the weird kid in college, like literally, like that was the conversation, like, you're going to be going to college. Maybe you should try to listen to some more normal stuff.
Have you tried this Caedmon's Call? They're great.
Yeah.
They'll normal you out.
But I mean, even today, and heck, it's not even real. It's not all about religion. Like, just tell someone you're into ska and they think you're weird.
Yep.
Like, if you were like, man, you know what I love? Goldfinger. They're like, oh, are you like stuck in the 90s?
Yeah.
Like, are you currently like living in a Tony Hawk Pro Skater video game?
Right, exactly.
Like, well, yeah. So yeah, it's like, it's like choosing to be like, okay, I'm going to take a couple different things that most of society thinks are really corny and put them together and be a Christian ska fan. But, yeah, I've always just been like, you know what? F it. Heck, just yesterday, I ordered Mike Herrera bass from Ernie Ball Music Man. And I was telling one of my friends, I'm like, look, a lot of the forum discussions say this is a really stupid bass to buy. Because one, it has all of the electronics removed because that's apparently how Mike likes his bass. So practically, it's sort of silly. Like the volume knob, the tone knobs, none of it work. They're all dummy knobs. So you're buying like a premium bass, and it's an otherwise very nice bass, but with all the electronics removed. And two, some people are like, plus, it's got that corny MXPX logo etched into the middle of it. I'm like, look, I don't give a crap. And my friend, she was like, well, that's what makes you cool. And I'm like, well, thank you. So I've definitely been that weird person. One other story about being the weird person who listens to Christian ska, and this might be too far afield to stay in this episode, but anyway, I want to tell you this story. I was a grad student at the University of Colorado at Boulder, working on my master's degree in philosophy. I remember it was a cold, wintry day. We had some party, and I was sort of a designated driver because, I'm a teetotaler.
Sure.
I don't drink. So I was driving this other guy back home in Boulder, and I had a bunch of Believers, like, Christmas album on.
Okay.
And the song Snowball Fight was playing. I specifically remember that. And my friend turns to me and he is like, you are the most wholesome person I have ever met. And I was just like, thanks, I guess. Like, so yeah, that's the other reaction. Some people are like, oh man, you're really corny. Other people are like, you are just a really wholesome, happy person. And I'm like, part of me is a happy person. I really do like this phrase that comes from Real Big Fish. Actually, it's an album. Candy-coated fury.
Sure.
I feel like that describes me as a person. Like, I tend to be a very nice, and I can be sort of a bubbly, fun person. But inside, there's a lot of anger. So,
which is, I think that is a really good, that for me is part of the ska music at times. Like, cause I totally agree. Yeah. Like I think I've been always drawn to kind of this punk and ska stuff and just even the alternative stuff because I've always felt a little different. I've always never really felt like especially in my adult life, I've never really felt like I've fit in with a lot of the evangelical community, and so that's fueled it a little more even. And I do think that's one of the things that I really do like about so many of the Five Iron does it well. I think the Insyderz do it well, where like there is this fury to it at times. There is this seriousness, but yet there's also this joyfulness. Like it does bounce back and forth. I always say about I think the Insyderz did this as well. I think Supertone. I don't know about the Supertones. Five Iron and the Insyderz for sure never took themselves too seriously. Like they were serious about it, but they never took themselves too serious. I've seen the Insyderz a couple times, and I felt like they were a little self-deprecating. I know, like even when they played Furnace Fest last year, I wasn't there, but I've seen the video, and they're like, thanks for letting us interrupt your hardcore festival with our ska set.
I really wish I had been there. I was in the midst of nursing school, and I felt like financially and practically, I just couldn't make it. But I really would, because as someone who, when I was younger, I would have told you that the Insyderz were my favorite band.
Yeah.
Like for much of my early Christian ska fandom, the Insyderz were at the top. Though I even recognized for myself that was just because they were the first.
Sure.
Like, if you would have asked me, well, which one is, like, I don't know, the most popular, I'd have been like, well, probably the Supertones. I think they sold the most albums or whatever. And, like, well, which one has, like, the best crossover appeal? I would have said Five Iron Frenzy. I'm like, I felt like a lot more not, like, that was the one where I could actually find some people who were into mainstream music who also listened to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Insyderz were, like, my personal, like, hey, they were the first. So yeah, I know it seems like I keep going afield of our main topic here. So yeah, I was happy when this album came out. Something I don't know if Joe will still remember this. You can ask him, because it came up in the time I interviewed him, and I think that was one where he just said no comment or something. When I saw him at the Insyderz merch booth at Cornerstone. It could have been 98, 99, or 01. Those are the 3 years I went to Cornerstone with my church youth group. He was putting tape on his face. Like duct tape or whatever. Like covering up his face with tape. I don't know if it was part of his like anxiety of dealing with fans or what. But yeah, I just remember literally seeing him. Like I didn't talk to him. I just saw him sitting there at the merch booth putting tape all over his face. So if you can find out why he did that, let me know.
I would guess total boredom is potentially an answer.
That could also be it. Yeah. That could also be it. I mean, I got a shirt from them that I loved. Once again, I'm someone who likes t-shirts, so I've had so many.
Right.
Like, I've literally got a closet just full of t-shirts. And anyway, I really liked the Insyderz one that looked like a Teamsters logo, like the Union logo, like with the two horse heads and stuff.
It's a great one. Yep.
I really like that Insyderz shirt.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I owned that at some point.
Yeah. I never had like the orange, like the Rodman shirt that he talks about.
Yeah, I never had that one either.
Joe has talked about like how Dennis Rodman was apparently photographed or videoed while wearing an Insyderz shirt at one time.
Yep. I remember that.
Shirt.
That made it into 7-ball. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember that being a big thing. So back to Skalleluia, not that I'm trying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. This has been a great conversation, but like, what are there any favorites from this album for you, or kind of standout tracks? And I know you said you listened to it recently, so are there any of them that kind of stand out to you and really jump out as favorites from this album?
For sure. So yeah, I listened to this album a lot when I was younger, and then I did re-listen to it last week on Spotify when I knew we were going to be having this conversation coming up.
Yeah.
But I mean, I listened to it enough as a kid that like I can remember each of these songs. Like literally I read the track list and like I can start playing them in my head.
Right.
I feel like I really like Ancient of Days.
Blessing and honor, glory and power be to the Ancient of Days. From every nation, all of creation will bow for the Ancient of Days. Every tongue in heaven and earth shall declare your glory, and we shall bow at your throne and worship. You will be exalted, O God, and your kingdom shall not pass away. Ancient of Days.
I don't know if it's sort of the musical styling of it, but yeah, I just into the Ancient of Days. Yeah. I don't know. I really like, but I mean, maybe I also just like that song, and like even the more traditional version of it maybe I like too. But yeah, that might be a favorite. But yeah, I like all of them really. Like there's not any of them on here that I'm like, you know what, no, I'm gonna definitely skip that one.
Yep. I like that a couple of these are kind of real throwbacks in the ways. Like Lord, I Lift Your Name on High is not a song that we sing anymore in church, at least in the church I attend.
Yeah.
But like, I like that that's kind of a throwback to, it feels like a youth group camp song, but it really I think their version really works. It's a fun little song. I really like the You Are My All in All, which kind of has a little bit of a round in it a lot of times. And again, those feel like kind of throwbacks to a simpler time of worship songs, and I think they really, really work in their style as well.
Lord, I left your name on high. Lord, I'd love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. You came from heaven to earth.
I agree. Yeah, I do like, I think that's part of what I do like about this album, is because, generally they are, like, more older, traditional, like you said, most churches today, you're not going to walk in and they're doing Ancient of Days,
right.
or Lord, I Lift Your Name on High, or, any of these really.
And I absolutely see why they won a Dove Award for Awesome God. I really think, because it's Rich Mullins' song, but then if you look at the credits, Joe is actually credited with lyrics because there's I can't think of it at this time, but there's additional parts to it that he added, and I think Awesome God is I really sounded like a weird accent there. Awesome God is really a great song on this. It does stand out.
An awesome God he reigns from heaven above with wisdom and power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom and power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom and power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom and power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God.
Yeah, Joe's emotion, like he really, I mean, then again, I think Joe is sort of always, at least, when he's recording a track, like he does really go for it. But I mean, like when it sort of tails off, when he's just repeating like our God is an awesome God, I'm like, that is.
And is Joy the one that starts with the Christian metal never dies? I feel like that's the track that
I think so, and I love that in part because it does feel sort of corny, but also like I don't know why, and maybe it's because you almost like, for me as like a ska kid, you almost felt like it gave you more legitimacy. Like I'm forgetting the name of the track, but there's on Motor City Ska, there was also like one that's like much heavier than sort of the rest of the tracks, right? Like when they got a little more metal-y, a little harder, I did always enjoy that about the Insyderz.
Christian metal never dies, baby.
I distinctly remember that as being like and again, we had some conversations about like the idea of authenticity. Like that was them being a little authentic about like, hey, this is something else we like. And you're right, it is a little silly, but it balances that whole idea of taking themselves seriously. They were serious about doing this album, but also not too serious and having some fun with it. And that's what this does.
It is almost sort of sad to me, because, now that we live in this age of podcasts and stuff, and I can hear Joe talking about his albums and whatnot, it's sort of sad to me that he doesn't, at least from what I catch, doesn't seem to really like these earlier things that they did. Like, I don't know, maybe he likes this more than he likes Motor City Ska. Like he seems to think that most of his Motor City Ska stuff, like, he was so young and he feels like he wrote corny lyrics and whatever. Like,
right.
But like, to me, it was pretty awesome. So it's like, have some grace for yourself when you were younger. Like, hey, if you're a teenager and you wrote some lyrics that now you're in your 40s and you look back and you think that was sort of corny, but they were, as you said, authentic.
You're always gonna have that, right? Because I love their last album. I'm with Joe in that I think they progressed and got better and better. Their last two albums, in my opinion, are their best albums. My favorite is Soundtrack to a Revolution. But the reality is that their most corny moment ever as a band, in my opinion, comes off that last album with the Insyderz Shuffle. That is by far and away the most corny moment, and that's on your last album. So give yourself a little grace even for that, because I love that album, but it's got that moment, and every time it comes on, I kind of go, oh, this is so weird. But there it is.
Yeah, and this is probably like part of being in the streaming age. Most of the time nowadays, when I listen to music, it's just like a shuffled playlist, you know? Like, oh, I want to listen to the Insyderz, so I put on the Insyderz.
Right.
And so yeah, you're totally right though. Like when that song comes on, it definitely feels very much different and sort of corny, and I'm assuming it's sort of tongue-in-cheek. Like, I'm assuming they recognized that it was corny when they did it.
Right.
But also they had fun.
The only song off this album that I do think is I don't know why I don't think it's a less quality, but it doesn't hit me as well. I believe it's the Jesus, Your Name Above All Names / More Precious Than Silver. That's the one that goes a little slower, and it has the like doo-wop part of it, I believe.
Yeah, at least it starts out that way, right? Doesn't it doesn't have a part where it goes faster. But it starts out with the very doo-woppy.
Yeah. That's the only one on this that if like I'm gonna bump one down as like, oh, this is one I don't like as much. That is the one that stands out as not as liking it as much. But I mean, I'm talking about the most minor of complaints here. Like, you know, getting a little nitpicky because overall I still can listen to this. I like playing this around the house. It's just got so many great songs, and if that's your low moment, in my opinion, and again, that's my opinion. I'm sure plenty of other people would have plenty of other low moments from this album. But I mean, I feel like I'm getting super nitpicky with even that one because you're right. There's so many other just great tracks on this album.
Yeah, I will co-sign what you said there. I mean, I enjoy that song, but yeah, it does, you know. Almost like the Insyderz shuffle, you know, you do get the feeling of like, okay, they're going for this different kind of style than they do, you know. So it could for sure come off as corny or
Yeah, and my guess is they had a reason for doing it that way. I will say it does throw a little bit of variety into the album, so maybe that's what they felt like they needed at track 8. You need something to mix it up a little, and that's what they went with, and totally fine. But it's the only one that kind of jumps out as me. But because I mean, I even think like the final song, "Morning to Dancing," I'm a big fan of closing tracks. I like a really really good strong ending, and I feel like this song this whole album does it. Like the opening track, "Oh Lord, You're Beautiful," comes out firing. It kicks the door in. I like an opening track that does that. And then "Morning to Dancing" is a great little closer. It's a little more calmed down, I think, if I remember. But that's a great closing track. Just seems to close out this particular album so well. And I like, you talk about listening on shuffle. I'm still very much a put an album on, you need to listen to every track, or that's my way of consuming so much music.
Yeah.
And so I love that arc, that this album feels like it does that. It starts strong. Ancient of Days is a great middle track to kind of bring the energy back up. And then Joy, I think the whole Christian Metal Never Dies. And then those final two tracks really end the album really, really well. So, yeah.
No, for sure. I think it's a great album.
Yeah.
I will probably have to start listening to it more. And I've talked to other people about this. So, to put this in historical context, it was not very long ago, like about a month ago, that MXPX and Five Iron Frenzy played in Denver.
Yeah.
And I got to meet some other people from the sort of online Christian music community. And I was telling Brock how I am someone who has like deep interests, but not broad interests. Like there's, because he had a friend, and forgive me, I forget his friend's name, a friend who had also traveled with him. And he asked me about some like Christian punk band, and I had no idea.
Right.
Like he was asked. So I'm like, okay, like, and Brock pointed out to me, because I said that, yeah, my interests are not very broad. He's like, yeah, but you really love certain things. I'm like, yes. Like, so really, I don't know if this is a sign of some sort of like atypical neurochemistry. Like, I mostly listen to Firefire and Frenzy and MXPX. Like, I try to listen to some new, like, I've listened occasionally to other stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, I should probably try to just, like, occasionally listen to the Insyderz, and even less occasionally I listen to the Supertones.
Right.
It's usually like, okay, if I need a long playlist, like I'm gonna go on a long trek, I'm like, okay, I will just make a list where I'll put like 5, like I will add in the Insyderz and the Supertones and just make like here's my big 3 list. But,
yeah, I do have playlists that I do as well, but like I think it is just a bit of that, like there's at times where my musical taste is too broad, and like somebody will be like, oh, did you like this album? And I kind of have to be like, I don't know, did I? And maybe listen to it once, so like I get like, and I think there's a bit of that compulsion, like, so it's not necessarily a good thing, like. And I'll say it, like, when people be, have you ever heard this band? I don't care if I haven't, because there's so much music out there, you can't listen to it all. And so, like, when somebody's like, oh, have you heard this band? I'm like, nope, I haven't, and I don't care. Just to be real honest, like, nope, I haven't. Great, I'll throw it on the list. Maybe I'll check it out. Maybe I won't. But there's so much going on that you can't keep up with all of it. So that's the way it goes sometimes.
I mean, yeah, that is one thing you and Brock both have in common is, you both seem to have very broad musical. Yeah. I mean, and that's probably true of also, like Eric and Josh, right? Like, because they both also are like, sort of see themselves as music critics, so like, someone who's going to be a music critic, I feel like, has to listen to a lot of music.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of why I don't see myself as a music critic, is I'm like, I probably not going to go listen to something I'm not super into.
Yeah.
Though I'm planning my own podcast where that is the whole point, is I'm going to listen to stuff I think is crap.
Okay.
I'm going to call it the Sounds Unpleasant podcast. And that is all because there was a conversation on CCM Twitter where someone was describing, I don't know who they were describing, May. I really don't remember. And like, I just responded with something like, sounds unpleasant.
It probably wasn't May then. May is fairly pleasant, I will say. It might have been somebody else.
I couldn't tell you May from a hole in the ground. Yeah. Like, I have no idea what May sounds like.
I couldn't have before about 2 years ago, so that was a late ad.
So, someone mentioned some band, and and they were trying to describe it to me, because I was like, okay, give me something to listen to. And my response was, sounds unpleasant, but maybe I'll try. And then that became like a joke between me and I think like Kylan from their show was, because I'm like, look, I support their show on Patreon, and I hardly listen to their show. Because I only seem to listen to the episodes like about Firefire and Frenzy.
There have been times where they've done episodes that I'm like, I've never even heard of this band. Like, it's because I think they're younger as well. So like a lot of the stuff that I was super into is it was long gone by the time they were in the youth group. So
for sure. So I sort of want to broaden my horizons. That's the thing. So I was like, maybe I'll start a podcast. And I will have people recommend an album for me to listen to that they think I will hate. Like, that will be the whole theme. But I will listen to it anyway, despite hating it. So, it'll probably be a bunch of metalcore, because that's all garbage.
you will get suggestions. I will say, I don't consider myself a critic. I'm just a guy who likes... Because I don't feel like I can always be super critical of it. I can kind of say, like, this is why I don't like it, but... then, people will say, well, but it's good because of this. And it's kind of like, okay, that seems fair enough. I just don't have a retort. So.
I'm not super critical. That might be part of it. So apparently in music, I seem to have like a very specific interest, but I'm also not generally super critical. Like, I don't go out of my way to be like mean. Now, I understand that's not really what a music critic is. You don't have to be mean to be a music critic, but like, like even with movies. So I actually recorded with a college friend of mine like 8 episodes of a movie review podcast that we never actually published anywhere.
Sure.
But that's one thing with me is like I pretty much like almost every movie I see to some level. There's only been a couple movies that I genuinely hated. So yeah, I'm not a super critical person. I'm more of a like, hey, this is sort of fun.
Right.
Like if it's not perfect, that's okay.
I have plenty of things I hate. I'm a bit of a, it doesn't come through all the time, but like I am a bit of a snob when it comes to music and movies, but I just don't try. I kind of just try and keep my mouth shut of like, if I have taken on the mantra of like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's kind of how I've taken it just because I feel like I'm a bit of a snob, and it always makes me laugh because I'm like, I am a bit of a music snob, and my favorite band is a 90s ska band. I am no ability to be a snob at this point. So I kind of know the weird dynamic of myself. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's good. We're maybe at opposite ends of some spectrum there. 'Cause, in all these online discussions, sometimes at least, I try to make it obvious that I'm sort of making fun of what's going on.
Sure.
Because I like to say things like, I will say things like, that is the worst band ever, about a band I've never even heard of.
Sure.
Because so many of these people on these Twitter threads, they get so passionate.
Right.
And sometimes so mean.
Yes.
Like, that was... In fact, I tried not to really take part in many of the conversations about the CCM Twitter tournament this year because last year I found some of the people who participated so mean. And I will make a point to say that Eric is not one of those people. Eric's very cool. Because once he sort of thought that I was like attacking him, and I'm like, no, bro. I got no problem with you.
Right.
My problem is with random pastor dude whatever, because some of them will have like pastor in like their Twitter handle or whatever, like telling me how horrible they think 5-Iron Frenzy is. Yeah. I'm like, that guy needs to go take a long walk off of a short pier. Like I will not stand that aggression. So yeah, like I sometimes will mock them by taking on this air of like, I am going to also make pronouncements about what the best music is. So I hope when people see my comments that they understand that I am being intentionally hyperbolic.
Sure.
When I say something like, when I criticize some band, half the time I've never even heard of them.
Sure.
And it's just me trying to be funny. But I try to make the statements really extreme. But also, sometimes I believe them.
Sure.
So that's the thing. So Brock actually asked me, he's like, is there a tell? Because then Brock told me his tell. There's actually something he does in his messages when they're a joke to let people know that it's not him making a serious statement. He leaves out punctuation when it's a joke.
Okay. I have so many typos in my tweets, no one would be able to tell.
See, I'm someone who tends to try to be very accurate with my grammar.
I'm a problem.
Maybe it has something to do with being a philosopher. We're very, very particular about language. But, when I say something like 5-Iron Frenzy is the best band ever, I probably do mean it. But, I have also come to this point in my life and in my philosophy about life where I think it's okay to sort of accept some things that are like contradictions. It's not logical. But, I can both say 5-Iron Frenzy is the best band ever. And on one hand, I'm serious. On the other hand, I know it's sort of a joke, right? And I'm okay with that. Yeah. And whether you take me seriously or not is up to you.
Right.
So
I've tended to just stay out of it. I remember there was one comment last year that did bug me to the point of I was ready to fight. And it was a comment somebody made when they were like, go vote for the Newsboys. It was when 5-Iron was going against the Newsboys because these other people are ruining the fun for the rest of us. Yeah. That one, I was ready to fight, and I decided not to, and that's why it was actually that comment that really has made me just basically not respond when somebody goes down either a political rabbit hole. I will basically just, not respond because that was I will say it. That was the stupidest comment. Like this idea that some of us enjoying something is ruining the true believers' fun. I wanted to tell him to F off. That's what I really wanted to do. I was like, I'm not going to do that.
I agree.
I've also found just like people will come at, because my stuff goes around a little bit now when I post stuff. Like it starts to get legs. Yeah. So there's people who kind of come into the community. And I had one recently where, he was like, I had posted about a Switchfoot album and I had said like it was this on my like favorite all-time albums list. He's like, where's this list? And I showed it to him and he was like, oh my gosh, you have 5 Iron above him. They've never done anything. And I kind of wanted to respond because I'm fairly quick-witted. I really wanted to respond like, well, when you put a meaningful, insightful, original thought out into the world, you let the rest of us know, because to this point, I know you haven't. And like, that's kind of how I felt. Like, but I just was like, I don't want to battle. I mean, so I just shut him. Yeah. I just don't respond. It's like, thanks for your input. Like, I don't care what you think, because I look through your Twitter responses and it takes me 5 minutes to realize like, yeah, you're just out here trolling people. You're just out here. Like, there's a totally different response. Like, so yeah, that's become my response is basically, I'm not going to respond when somebody goes negative. It's just not worth my time. So
no, I did basically the same thing. Cause last year I did respond. I got into some heated exchanges because I've never liked Twitter, and it has nothing to do even with its current ownership. I've just never been like, that's not a format I enjoy. Sure. I am much more of an Instagram person. I take thousands of pictures. Sure. Like, and I post a lot of them on Instagram. Like, that is my forte if I have a social media forte. Right. But no, I've never liked Twitter. But yeah, I got into some of those arguments last year. So this year I just tried not to. Basically, I just like, look. Also, it doesn't seem, maybe things are a little less heated this year.
They are.
But yeah, I did try to. I've even deleted some comments I made. Sure. Because I made some comments this year where I think I wrote a tweet and I left it up for a few minutes and then deleted it, where I said something to the effect of, if NF beats Rich Mullins, I will take that as a sign that God does still intervene, and he has hardened their hearts like he hardened Pharaoh's heart.
I think this is the one that's going to get heated. I think people are going to be upset if NF wins. I think more so than even 5 Iron winning. I'm a little worried to see how this plays out, but like, I'm sorry, it's not the dude's the most streamed artist in the entire tournament. And I said it on my other podcast that hasn't come out yet, but like, hats off to his fans. I mean, they have rallied. They are engaged. And so whatever you think about him, I don't enjoy his music really at all. No. But man alive, hats off to his fans, because they're out there fighting for him, and I think that's great. That's what you want. Yeah,
I think he is like the rap version of all the like sad boy metalcore and stuff that is so I just want to be popular.
Clear, that is Todd's comment. That is not Caleb's comment.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I see it. It's like, oh, like the same people seem to like him who also like all this metalcore.
I don't know if that's true. Again, that is Todd. We were at the end of the show. We'll post his Twitter account and his Instagram account.
Yeah, you can direct all your comments about that to me. No, I said it on Twitter too. So like, and a couple people liked my comments. So yeah, nobody like flamed me. So that's good.
That's good. That's good.
But no, and I guess it was about time to wrap up. But I was gonna say about the whole Twitter thing. Yeah, there have been a couple people, I'm not going to name names, but a couple of people that I have like just blocked, because there was one person that I got into like a heated argument with that I was just like, you know what, this is not worth it. But I could also tell this is the sort of person that I'm going to keep running into, so I'm just going to block them. Yeah. And there was another one who like just seems genuinely sort of crazy to me. Yeah. Like seems maybe mentally unstable and and at least, even if he's not mentally unstable, he just loves to argue. Like, I feel like, and there's some people like that. I've known people like that in my real life who just love to argue. Like, it's almost like whatever you say, he's going to say the opposite.
Yeah.
So I didn't block him, but I did unfollow him. Like, I don't need to see this guy's stuff all the time.
Yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
all I know is he just wants to argue with people. So I'm just trying to, I'm like, I'm not going to be mean to these people. I'm just going to say goodbye. I'm going to, whatever that verse is, right? If you're not accepted in a town, shake the dust off your sandals and move on to the next town. Like,
exactly.
That's pretty much it. Like, I'm just going to leave them alone.
That's so funny. Ironically, the only person that's ever blocked me on Twitter was a guy who he blocked me, and he was one of the ones he wanted to fight. My favorite part about the story is I got blocked, and I was a little thrown off by it. Eric actually reached out to him because Eric's connected to him and was like, "Hey, why do you have Caleb blocked?" And his response, and this is why in the end, I'm very happy that I'm still blocked by him. Because his response was, well, if I talked to Caleb, I talked to him briefly, and if I remember correctly, he was one of the people who mocked Christian music the most, which is the most ridiculous comment. I will say it. It's the most ridiculous comment I've ever heard. If you look at the CCM Twitter hashtag, the most common user of that hashtag is me.
Probably you.
It's not even close. I win hands down because I'm promoting the most Christian music. I don't love all of it, but I challenge somebody to go through my Twitter feed and find where I'm openly mocking Christian music. There's Christian music I don't love. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but openly mocking is one of the most hysterical comments I ever heard. So I think that's kind of become a bit of my default setting on Twitter is like, I don't know this person and I don't have to lose any sort of emotional energy to deal with them. So yeah, that's my thought on the
it's
whole
hard.
Twitter stuff.
Yeah, I think that's wise. It is hard. Like, I'm definitely someone who it's hard for me to be like, oh, but this person out there hates me. I feel bad about it. You know, like yeah. But sometimes, you just have to, you have to move on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of Twitter, I'm super glad you were able to come on the show and join us. And you mentioned Instagram, I think, as well. So if people want to follow you or get connected to you online, where can they find you?
So, in the last couple of years, I sort of transitioned I think pretty much everywhere. My username now is Socrates on a bike.
Okay.
So, just the SOCRATESONABIKE. Socrates on a bike, just all one word.
Okay.
Because it brings together two of my big interests, which are philosophy and bicycles. Like, if you find my Instagram, and it is a public Instagram page, like, so you don't even have to, it's not, you can also have private Instagram pages, but it's a public Instagram page, and 90% of what I post is like cycling related content, and it's not like pro cycling stuff. It's me and my friends and just pictures of us out on bike rides, and also a little bit of talking about bike racing and a little bit of just my other interests. Like I posted about music stuff. I posted clips from that Fire and Frenzy MXPX concert weekend, and that's my big thing. So both Twitter. Though once again, I'm not very active on Twitter, so but definitely, feel free to follow me there if you want to, or you can find me, the place I'm most active is Instagram.
Awesome.
So, Socrates on a bike.
Socrates on a bike. Okay. Well, man, I can't say thanks enough for taking the time to join me to talk about not only Skalleluia and the Insyderz and a whole bunch of other things. This has been absolutely great. Definitely, we're going to have to find other things to get you back on the podcast for. So, I can't say thanks enough for joining me. So,
yeah, well, thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Once again, I want to just thank Joe and Todd for joining me today. It was super fun to talk about this album and all the other things that we ended up getting into. So thanks again, guys. I really, really appreciate it. If you're listening and you're interested in joining the show to talk about an album you love, you can find me on Twitter at KilledTheSpy, or you can email me at KilledTheSpyPodcast@gmail.com. The music at the beginning and the end of the show is the instrumental version of the song Sing It Out at Street Level by Peg and the Rejected, which is the Dingees focused on ska tunes. Check out the Dingees. Check out Peg and the Rejected. Let me know what you thought. What did I get right? What did we get? 3, 2, 1... Let us know what you thought of this show or any of the other shows. What did we get right on this? What did we get wrong? Did you like all of our spicy takes later in the show? Please subscribe and share the podcast if you're so inclined. Leave a rating or review. I've heard that is the most effective way to spread the word about podcasts. And like I say every show, and most of all, I just want to thank you if you engage with me at all on social media. I put a lot of time in setting up the daily posts about all these different album anniversaries, and to see people get excited to check out something new or revisit an old album is always a thrill. If you enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other show I do with my friend Scott. It's called I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. It's not just a podcast where we reminisce about our youth group days, but we actually have gone and tried to interview some of our fellow 90s youth group kids and find out where they're at now and how that youth group experience has impacted their lives. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.